Good morning, I'm Sally Pointer. It's a beautiful day at the start of July here in Herefordshire in the UK, and I've come out into the woods to have a really close look at stinging nettles. Now this video is about stinging nettle string, and we're going to go right back to basics so that if you've never made string from stinging nettles before, you should have a good idea of what to do, what to look for, what to watch out for. First thing to do is have a really good look at our nettles. Now nettles are a big family. They're found throughout most of the world and they can vary quite a lot. These ones are growing on the edge of the wood, so they're in partial shade. They're nice and tall, lovely healthy leaves, and the important thing for us, because we want to make string from them, is that they're starting to flower. These little tassels here are the nettle flowers. Now that gives us a good idea that the plant is fully mature, so the fibres are going to be strong enough to make fibre from. It's also usually the point at which we stop eating the nettles. They're generally a little bit too strong. Some people find they don't agree with them at this stage. What we're looking for in a good nettle for string is a straight one. This is excellent. But ideally we want one without too many side branches. This one has got some side branches. They're not terrible, so I'd still be happy to use this. But if you've got really big branches, what you might find is you get knots of fibre around here. That can make it trickier. The fibres themselves run up the stem in long strands, but they're generally about the length of the distance between the leaf joints. So watch out for that, and if you can find a good strong nettle with good long sections, that will make you a really good piece of string. Now I'm not using gloves at the moment. I'm used to handling nettles. I don't get stung very often. But if this is your first time working with nettles, put some gloves on. You'll probably find yourself much more confident. When it comes to harvesting your nettles, a pair of scissors, a pair of secateurs, a knife, whatever, a pair of gloves will do the trick very nicely. You want to follow your nettle right down to near the base, but don't worry about actually pulling it up. There have been studies done on the fibres in nettles, and you don't gain anything really from going too close to the bottom. Snip off your nettle. When it comes to peeling your nettle, it's just a case of, with gloved hands, start at the top, run your hands firmly down the stem, get rid of those leaves. And I tend to run my hands in the opposite direction as well, just to make sure that any of those little stinging hairs are no longer there. From here on in, we're not going to need the gloves. Let's have a look at the stem of the nettle now that we've taken the leaves off. You've got a square section stem with deep grooves running along each side and very definite leaf joints where the leaves sprouted off the side. So our fibres are going to be running along the stem. They're going to want to separate off into ribbons along those grooves, and we may well get little breakages in them or little clusters of fibres that mean things don't come off in a strip around there. That's the bit we need to watch for. Next thing to do, let's process that nettle. Having taken the leaves off our nettle, we now need to get inside them to get at the fibres. So just as a reminder, we've got these long sections where the fibres will be really good. They can be a little tricky around the leaf joints. Now there's a lot of ways to get into a nettle. I quite often like to slightly squash my nettle with a piece of wood at first. You don't need to do it very hard. Underfoot is fine. I'm up in a field with very squashy ground underfoot, so that's not going to work. So splitting the nettle open is the next best thing. You get your thumbnails into those leaf joints. You can often persuade the nettle just to open up. Now if you do decide to use a knife, be very, very careful. You don't want to cut through your finger. I've done that more times than I'd like to admit to. And apart from the bits around the leaf joints, which can be just a little stiff, usually your fingernails will be quite adequate to get you into the length of that nettle. So open it up as far to the end as you possibly can. Just put a leaf on that one. Don't worry if the very, very end bit breaks off. Now inside your nettle you have a pithy centre. So on the outside you have the bark, the fibres laid just under that green bark. It's very, very thin. In fact, you can see some of them drifting through from where we've already processed it. But that thick, stiff middle needs to come out. And the easiest way to do that is just to bend it back over your fingers and peel away that centre pith. Now nettles do vary. Some of them are going to come away really easily. Some of them are going to fight back a little bit. It depends how mature they are. And also the variety of nettles, where they're growing. The ones I'm finding in this patch are actually a little bit tricky to peel. It's just taking me a little bit longer to get into them than they sometimes do. Usually once you get it started though, you can smooth off most of the bark. There we are, and that's what we're aiming for. So we've got long ribbons. Now we looked earlier at the grooves in the stem, and automatically our nettle bast is the outer section of the bark with the fibres included. So the bast layer is splitting down into ribbons. Now we need to encourage this. If I was processing for very fine fibre, I'd want to do things like scrape at this point, but we want to make a very simple string. So what we want are lots of thin layers. So being careful at the leaf joints, separate these strands of nettles into as many strands as you comfortably can. And usually I will find you'll get definitely 4, should get 8, you might even get 16 or so strands. Don't bother counting, just keep subdividing your strips of nettle as much as you can until you get a nice result. So you're going to end up with a bundle of nettle fibres that looks something like this. They're full of moisture at the moment. I could twist them up into cordage, and that's fine if all you need to do is tie a temporary shelter together or carry something back that you found out in the woods, but that's going to shrink up and it's going to become loose with time. So to make really good cordage, what we need to do is let this dry for a while. So when you hang your nettle fibres to dry, try not to fold them up into a bundle. As they dry, all those folds can possibly end up making weak spots. You're far better just to drape them quite gently over something. If you can't hang them flat, just hang them so that they have just a simple loop at the top. Let them dry for a couple of hours and then we can make string with them. I've got some nettles that I've dried. So this is a bundle that I've dried for a while. This is the bundle that we've just processed. And if we can compare them, you can see that the ones that are fresh are very, very flexible, a lot of moisture in them. The ones that are dry, there's still some bend to them, but they've shriveled up. All that natural moisture has left them. Now, if I were to make string with them at this moment, they're probably just a little bit too dry. I could risk having some breakages. So I'm just going to go off camera just for a second. I'm going to pour some of my water bottle over them. You don't need much, just a splash. And give them just maybe a minute to soften up. Then we can make some string. Fold your bundle of fibres in half so that you're holding the bend in your left hand. Now don't worry if you're left-handed, I will show you the other way around in a second. Now this hand doesn't have to hold things terribly hard, you're just supporting things. The right hand's going to do all the work. So we're going to start by twisting away from us. So we're twisting in a clockwise direction. Twist away, it's not a huge twist, just put a little bit of twist onto it, and then I want to swap places with the bundle underneath. So I'm using some spare fingers to grab the strands underneath, and I'm going to swap them over. Now this is the top strand. Twist away, cross down. Twist away, cross down, twist away, cross down. Keep twisting and crossing, and you should quite quickly start to make a nice strong string. Now if you happen to be left-handed, we'll just swap this round, you'd have been holding things in your right hand, and the easiest way is usually to twist the bottom strand towards you, cross it up with the one behind. Twist down, cross up. So it's the same method, doesn't matter which way round that you do it. Now, all of our strands of nettle bark and fibre are different lengths in our bundle. And after a while, we're going to get to the point where some are starting to run out. So the easiest way to keep extending your string is to add in fibres a little bit at a time. So from my spare bundle, I've selected a very thin extra piece, and I'm going to lay it across both sides of my bundle of fibres. Just keep twisting and crossing, and that is going to work in very, very quickly. Now it won't take you much practice before you can do this very evenly. This hand can come off anytime you want, it's only supporting it. And don't worry too much about exactly how you hold your hands and fingers. How you will use your hands in day-to-day life will make quite a big difference as to what's a comfortable motion for you. So if you find rolling your fingers and thumbs tricky, for example, try twisting the entire wrist and coming back. If a pinch here is tricky, try holding your finger further down, rotate the wrist to make the cross, swap things back. There's always a different way of holding things. I'm just going to make a little bit more string and I will come back to you. I've made most of my string now, just a little bit at the end. And what you'll often find is as you start running out of fibres, your string will get narrower. Now the easiest way to deal with that as you get near the end is just to fold the very end trailing parts up into the body to keep the thickness reasonably consistent while you work those very, very last few twists. Same method, twist and cross, twist and cross, twist and cross. You don't need to tie a knot or anything at the end. This is a stable, balanced cord. If you'd been spinning wool or linen with a spinning wheel or a spindle, you'd have spun lots of yarn and then you'd have plied it together with another skein or ball. So this is exactly the same method. You're spinning, plying, spinning, plying. You're doing it all in one motion, which means that your finished cord should be stable, won't come apart easily. So just work until you get to the end of your string. If it's really traily, you can clip that off at the very end. And see, nothing much is going to happen. So the string you've made is strong. Nettle fibres are extremely robust. And this is quite adequate for all sorts of practical uses. You could work that up into all sorts of projects. Now I do have other YouTube videos about cordage and netting and fibres, so do check them out if you're interested in learning more. This is the most basic form of nettle string you can make. We've left the bark on, we haven't scraped the fibres free of their outer layers, so it's always going to be a little bit rustic, a little bit coarse. But if you've never worked with nettles before, it's a perfect place to start. I hope you enjoy making your first nettle string. Do let us know how you got on with it.